I guess I need to turn my microphone on, don't
We're ready to start. Turn the mics on.
I? Okay, yeah. Bring the mic. Welcome, everybody, to the Camden Energy and Sustainability Committee meeting of October. So we've got a lot to cover, and I would like to introduce, we have some guests visiting, so let's just say hello to our guests. Rosanna Patane, is that pronounced correctly?
In Sicily, yes. In the U.S., it's just Patane.
Oh, I like Patane better. Is from York. She's on the Energy Steering Committee in New York, Maine, which is as far south as you can go until you get, before you get to Portsmouth.
Curious south of us.
Is it? Is it? Okay. And because whatever brought her to this area, Tennant's Harbor, she's reaching out to the various Energy Committee members. And I heard from a spy that you were in Rockland at their Energy Committee meeting. So we appreciate you reaching out. And she wanted to kind of let us know what's going on down in York. And they have signed the Global Covenant of Mayors this year, so we'll be looking forward to hearing from her. But there are a number of other things on the agenda that I kind of wanted to cover before we get into something kind of non-agenda. Our other guests are Beatty Parker. Thank you for coming, Beatty.
I could say 2 words of non-agenda.
We'll get there. And we
Nancy Jenkins, but I signed up to be an
Need to-
alternate member of the committee, so I'm not really a guest.
Put the microphones on, please. If they have a red, they're not on. Push
Is it
the button
on?
to turn it green. No, you need to push the button at the beginning. There you go.
Okay. I had signed up to be an alternate member of the committee,
Okay.
so I'm not exactly a guest. But if you don't need an
Okay,
alternate member,
so-
then I'll just go away because I've got other things to do.
appreciate that. Could you spell your name for our secretary?
Jenkins. I think she
I
knows
know.
how to spell
I-
my
yes,
name.
I do.
She's a good friend.
I haven't gotten confirmation that the select board has
I don't remember.
added you as an
you-
alternate.
Well, it
but
doesn't-
You're welcome, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'll just listen, and if you need me, you can call me, and if you don't need me, you don't need to call me.
Well, thank you very much. And we really appreciate you coming forward, and I'm sure Mark will let me know, or somebody will let me know if it all becomes
Did
official.
you submit paperwork to?
No, I wasn't asked to. I spoke with you online. I emailed you,
Okay.
and you answered and said, come to the last meeting, and I wasn't able to do it, and so I came to this
I
meeting
see.
instead.
So you're sort of getting caught on. Well, so there's an official form just for you to sign your interest.
Okay.
And then the select will understand that you would like to be on the committee, and I believe we have an alternate opening, I think. I'm not sure. And,
I was
And then
going
they
by
can-
what was on the website, on the town website.
okay,
Um,
great. We like to make sure that we've got the next meeting lined up for anybody who needs to scurry out for some reason. So typically, our meetings are the third Monday of November, of the month. So that's November 18th. Does anybody object to having our next meeting on the 18th? Great. So that's our next meeting. Thank you. We will, I'd like to ask if you'd had a chance to review the minutes. I did hear back from Brian and Pete that they're okay with you. Are there any other 2 people that are satisfied with the minutes, or does anybody have a comment they'd like to make about the minutes that were sent around late last night?
I did read them and they looked good, but I was absent at our last meeting, so I feel like somebody else should chime in. But I appreciate the
Okay.
update.
Thank you, Anna. All right. Anybody else have any comments? Should we go ahead and okay them or not?
I move we okay the minutes.
Second.
Votes? They're okay with me, too. Okay, thank you. As, okay, as written. So, on our agenda tonight, we'll be discussing some updates on the streetlights project, the feasibility report, which will be probably a somewhat lengthy discussion. Pearl might have some things to say about the student efforts, and I can give you a few things from our select board chair, and Rosanna Patana would like to tell us about York, and we'd like to talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the future. Beatty, does anybody else, Beatty, I'd like to hear your non-agenda items comments, and if anybody else has comments or questions about non-agenda items, please say so. Beatty?
You want to give her a microphone?
Several months ago, I sent around a letter and talking about getting more trees on the streets. And I just wanted to ask your committee to consider the contribution of our existing urban trees and ones that we might have in the future if we can get that program tanked up a bit, going faster for cooling, I guess, really, for climate effects for the town as part of the energy thinking. So I'm not speaking very clearly, but
Thank you.
I can speak to that a little bit.
I don't want to spend a lot of time because it's a
No.
non-agenda item, but
This is
just if
more
we can
if you-
pass this
We
through.
received your letter, and I brought it up in a select board meeting and tasked the Conservation Commission to take charge of that. And since then, of course, there've been some changes in the commission, so we're looking to repopulate it. And one of the agendas the select board has talked about is making that a priority of their schedule, their work plan. So thank you for the letter, and
Yeah.
we're working on it, and I think it is real important.
the reason I asked Energy Committee specifically is because it'd be nice to have some numbers that somebody might generate at some point of where we are and where we might go in terms of both absorbing CO2 and cooling, urban cooling. And Rotary,
Numbers for what, BD? For
how much storage an urban forest produces with our tree cover and what we might be able to turn it into. This is a whole thing, so I don't want to take time.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. That's good input. Is that something that you would like to do a bit of a report on
I-
and provide it to the Conservation Commission perhaps?
I
or-
wouldn't mind going to a meeting, but if I stop trying to take care of my stuff while I can still see and think, I will just lose completely.
So you would like to hand that off to some entity to follow
Yeah,
up
I'd like
on?
to know about it going and be part of maybe the effort, but I can't organize it now.
I wonder if we can see whether there's maybe a student that might be interested in that?
I can help people who are interested in it, but
It's a little bit field of what the Energy Committee does.
yeah, because you're not thinking of that kind of contribution to energy efficiency.
Well,
and
there are a
energy-
lot, there are many different ways to approach energy efficiency and energy use reduction and carbon sequestration and so on, but I don't think we've actually gone to carbon sequestration as one of our approaches yet.
Carbon
That
sequestration.
doesn't mean we can't.
'Cause I said, yeah,
Yeah.
Carbon sequestration is one, and the other is, I think we're going to go into a lot of air conditioning use in Maine, which we have not used in the past.
Right,
And if you can shade asphalt, keeps the whole town cooler. So, and you have to plant the trees in advance.
thank you for that thought. It's not something we have thought about, which doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it. It means that it's good to
Okay, you
have.
can use that letter as a prompt, and I'll send it out again.
Thank you.
And Marina has said she might be interested in helping with an arboretum, with getting tree starting, a tree nursery, and Rotary has at
Sorry,
least
could you go back to the Arboretum mention? What was that?
arboretum, a tree nursery if we need trees, and Rotary might be interested in helping fund it, or helping collect money to get things. But anyway, you don't have to think about that. It'd be more than numbers of the value that I would think that the Energy Committee might think about.
Thank you. I it's interesting.
I do
Interesting.
recall that the town has a program where you can get trees to plant. I think they're for free, sort of around Arbor Day. There was something a couple of years ago.
Soil and Water has.
Maybe it was,
trees.
maybe it was that they were
They're
announcing that
very
soil and
tiny,
water.
but that,
Yeah.
if there was a nursery, then we could get some.
Suggesting that the town start a nursery?
Well, I'm just throwing it out that it would be helpful, and Marina expressed an interest, so.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you said the select board discussed this?
We
Is
discussed
the-
it.
Is the Conservation Commission, hand off to the Conservation Commission, the select board's take on how to approach this?
That's where we thought we should go with it, and we're still planning on that as we reconstitute the Conservation Commission. That's still the direction
I
we're
think that
looking
makes
at.
sense. It certainly would love to have updates from them regarding how that's going. Thank you, Beatty. Streetlights project, I sequestered, grabbed Jeremy to ask him what the latest greatest is on this project. The town of Camden is going forward with taking ownership of all of our streetlights and converting them to LED 4,000 Kelvin lamps. And we have, we are coordinating, we have sort of gathered in or formed a team of towns in the vicinity who are interested in participating in this effort, and we've hired consultant to Real Term Energy, thank you, to shepherd and manage this project. The, according to Jeremy, the ownership process is almost complete. The survey of streetlights took quite a long time. That's where I was hoping our committee could help, but since it was decided by the committee not to help with that survey, it did take Real Term quite a bit of time to get that done. So, but they are moving forward, and that should be just about complete, the survey. And the funding, I asked Jeremy where the funding was coming from. I'm not clear on that. Do you know,
I
Mark?
don't know that. I know that in my discussions with him, he said that it looks like we have a contractor to do the work, and I don't remember the name, so it's moving forward.
They put out an RFP, and Hedstrom.
Yes,
will
I
be
think
doing that
that's,
work?
yeah, that's who I think they're,
Hedstrom Electric.
It's right in town.
I know, I just didn't know what the name of his business was, Hedstrom Electric. So things are bumping along in that regard, so that's good news. Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Rick Seibel today a little bit about this project, because he and the new Public Works Director have been actually doing the survey. So, and they're, like you said, they're almost complete. They've gone and found, they've cross-referenced and found all the CMP. They've put eyes on the various poles that were not, there's discrepancy on the CMP survey, because what they're trying to do is figure out, okay, exactly what are we paying for, where is it, et cetera. So that's almost complete. I asked specifically, do you understand the process by which this Real Term Energy, how does this work? How is Public Works involved? Who's got direct oversight? Who's the contact person? And I wasn't able to get too many answers in that regard, which is something that I would hope that we as an energy committee got a little bit more clarity about. Sort of, I'm not necessarily thinking about it in terms of oversight, but I'm thinking in terms about how can we help the town to offload some of the the project management that this is going to require. There's a lot of moving parts in order to do this right in terms of this is the time to look at where the lights are, which lights can be removed, et cetera. And if we miss that opportunity, it's going to be much more difficult going forward. So I think we do need to have some robust and transparent process by which we go about,
So,
helping the town to oversee this.
well, and Mark, I hope you will help us to get a grip on how we can help with this process, because this has been pretty much Energy Committee hands-off project to this point. In terms of our participation, we haven't been invited to and haven't found a niche where we can help. So it's probably be easier if the select board, or you representing the select board, told us how we can help rather than our continuing,
I will
trying to keep trying to figure that out.
I will investigate that.
Because it's something we're very interested in, and we want to see it proceed, and, if it means that
That could be
they,
helpful.
if they need extra eyes or hands or whatever,
Got it.
and we can do it, that'd be good. Thank you.
So Pete, if I'm understanding correctly, it seems like the opportunity is that rather than just blindly replacing, all of the existing streetlights, it's a chance for us to determine which ones are necessary, perhaps determine some are unnecessary, so we're not
Well, that's-
spending
thank
money
you.
to upgrade
That's
units that
supposed
we
to be a
don't
part
actually
of
need.
the RFP and the part of the process, and we want to be sure that that's true, and that's why we want to have our ears open to what's going on, so that it doesn't get too far along and we get a final report and we find out, oh, wait, we thought this and you did that.
I specifically asked about that this morning, and that process has not started yet.
Right, and so, it's not clear to me that the timeline and the details of what that process looks like and who are the stakeholders and I think I would like to see much more transparency and clarity on that process, because I think we can help.
Okay,
Take
thank you.
Take some of the load off town employees.
Yeah, that's great. Very good. Well, it's great that we've got the project going somehow or other, and we're making progress, so. Solar generation. This week, Rich Roughgarden of Maine Solar Engineering, the report was made available to us, and I was given a print copy of it, and I was able to get a digital copy of it today from Janice, because it is now on the select board agenda to be reported upon on Tuesday, tomorrow night. This is Rich Roughgarden of Maine Solar Engineering was hired by the town to do a feasibility study of the photovoltaic power generation potential for the Camden, with a mind towards the municipal electrical energy use. We are interested in expanding our solar array, and the question is where and how much will it cost? And those are the questions that he endeavored to answer. So his final report, which I sent out today to the members digitally, will be discussed at the select board meeting tomorrow night.
This
It's-
just came in like half an hour before.
You did not have time to look over this.
I did.
apologize.
I looked at it.
But I received the print copy, and then I looked this weekend online for the select board packet and found this morning it had not been put into the packet yet, or the packet had not been put online yet. So I emailed Janice, and she sent it to me, and then I sent it out. So yes, I'm sorry that you didn't have time to look at it, but I will give you my rundown, and I'm sure Pete might have some things to say about it, and then you can look at it at your leisure from your computer, and then you can listen to the report being given. So I'll give you the summary as far as I can, and I would welcome Pete to add to that as he sees fit. He basically did an audit of the municipal energy use in 2018-19 period, and the numbers in that audit totaled to a kilowatt hour usage of 2.7 million kilowatt hours in the year.
How many?
2.7. Now, interestingly, I know our Energy Committee is going to be very interested in comparing that with the total kilowatt hour usage that we understood the town to be using as of the 2014 audit that was done by Watershed School in their carbon report, and in 2015. And their numbers were, at that time, we were considerably lower in our usage. I'm looking for the numbers that I wrote down here somewhere. Why isn't that here? Oh, backside? No. Which, dadgummit. I'm not finding it. Seabright. Oh, here we go. So in the watershed report, which was published in 2015 in May and was looking at the 2014 energy consumption, it was approximately 2.05 million kilowatt hours. So 2.05 in 2014, 2.7 now. So we've gone up, and the kilowatt hours that list, he said, included the offset from the Sagamore Farm solar array, which is very sad news for me, anyway. I'm sure the rest of you are not
When you
that
say
thrilled.
included the offset, what
So,
do you mean?
well, what that means is that the solar array was, the PPA was set the solar array to offset 9 meters, plus the meter that is assigned to
Yeah.
the solar array itself. And those 9 meters, their kilowatt consumption is supposed to be on this list. Now, I didn't have a whole lot of time to study it in great detail, but I did call Mr. Roughgarden with a number of questions that did come up to ask him particularly about how the Sagamore Farm solar array was reflected in this power usage and cost audit, which is Appendix A in the report. So he said that since the meters that it offsets are included in this report, I did find 4 zero meters that showed a 0 kilowatt hour, which is not 9. And the fire department is not shown at all in terms of its supply. So I was left with some confusion, which I did express to him. Unfortunately, when I talked to him, I hadn't made an appointment by phone, so he didn't have his report in front of him. So, but he was made aware that there's some questions and that maybe he'll have those answers by tomorrow evening.
Offset, you would mean that it did not include
It means that.
power generated, that you're just excluding that. Is that what you mean by
It
offset?
means that the kilowatt hours as reflected on this audit come through as zero because the generation at the solar panels offset that meter.
So our usage is a little bit higher than the
Is
2.6.
even higher than 2.7.
Because we're crediting there,
Okay,
he's
that's what I was trying to
taken,
understand. Yep.
yeah, X and subtracted Y, and now we're left with X minus Y.
He and Bob Falciani, the chair of the select board, have both indicated to me that the problems that have been revealed with regard to the solar panels generating more power than the meters assigned to be offset that problem has not been resolved yet, fully. Some of it has. The credits that were lost have, but we're still losing credits which we hold for a year are still being lost. We're still in the positive, and those credits are being lost every month, and that hasn't fully been fixed. So that's another disappointment. So that's one thing. Now, Mr. Roughgarden identified, well, he listed 5 potential sites for a solar array, or solar arrays plural. Camden Public Safety Building, the Public Works Facility, expansion at the Sagamore Farm site, and the Old Tannery site. A 5th one, Camden Snow Bowl. But the 5th one, Camden Snow Bowl, he notes, this site is marginal for a small system. So I called him, as I said this afternoon, to ask some questions, and because his report follows by saying the above PV system potential would offset approximately 30% of the town's electrical use. So I asked him, do you mean all 5 of those sites? Or the 4 sites, not counting the Snow Bowl, or what? And his response was that the 4 sites, Public Safety Building, Public Works Facility, Sagamore Farm Expansion, and Old Tannery Site, together, if they had solar put on them, would offset 30% of the town's, the municipal, not the entire town's, electrical use. He says that to target 100% of the power use, the town of Camden would need to acquire more real estate, and I'm assuming real estate would include basically square footage. I'm hoping he means maybe rooftops too, not just land, but he's probably thinking land. This real estate can be in another town, with the power generated by it credited to the town's accounts. We could lease land. Usually in that case, when it's not our land, it has to be leased, and that lease cost is wrapped into the PPA costs. This would be, we'd need 2 megawatts for the town's use. This cost would come to about 3.65 million.
Cost
And
of what would come to 3.6?
putting up a 2 megawatt array would cost about 3.65 million. And would require, if we did it all in one spot on a piece of land, would require 7.6 acres. So the numbers 2 megawatts and 3.65 million are used in a cash flow analysis that he did. That, as he worked out the economic benefits, that would be that would use the new 2020 solar policy that was passed by the state, in which 100% of the supply charges and 75% of the distribution charges could be offset by the solar. And then he goes on to describe what PPAs are and how PPAs work to incent the investor and the town, and so on. So I think it'll be interesting to have this presented to the select board and have them ask questions, and we can ask questions as well when that presentation is made, maybe when you've had a chance to look at the report, once you have a chance to look over it, yeah.
One question I had, what you said he said that the Snowball site would not be good for a small project. Now, does that imply would not be good for our purposes, or does it imply would be good only if we did a bigger project?
Well, I'd maybe talk to that a little bit because,
Let me just answer what he told me, and then I'd like you to add to that,
Sure.
please. I asked him about a solar over parking lot over car roofs, which did not look like a very feasible, economically feasible potential, because typically those types of solar are in more southern latitudes where the slope is not as great. There is the problem of snow coverage and the expense of the way those are constructed. And apparently, the only other thing was the maintenance barn at the Snow Bowl, but there weren't other plots of land that were available, so he didn't see any kind of a economically feasibly large array. Not meaning 7 acres, but meaning just something big enough to count.
I think
Pete.
it's marginal even for a small system,
so
not suitable for large.
Sorry, Brian, what was that?
It's pretty clear. It's marginal for even a small system, so it's not good for even a tiny system. It's no good for a big system, because we don't have a place to put a big system. So it's,
Pete?
well, we've done all this work before.
yeah, this is,
So I'm a little confused and concerned about the cost of this this piece of paper that really hasn't really told us a whole lot more, except that I think it's good to have a cost estimate for a large 7-acre parcel. I think that I'm hopeful that at least now we have some numbers and we can move forward. There are plenty of solar suppliers in the state that are hoping to work with municipalities to get this thing done. Let's just move forward and do it.
Yes, the report finishes by saying this feasibility study hopefully provides information for review by all parties, reflects the current rules around federal tax incentives, and once the feasibility issues are understood, he suggests calling for requests for proposals from PV installers to offer a PPA package. The key issue for Camden is where the system is to be installed and the agreement for owning or using the real estate. I wanted to mention that I did ask him some more about the tannery site. I said, well, where exactly did you have in mind for that? He did make it clear that Jeremy Martin made it clear to him that a farmer's market will be on that site. And I think that Jeremy directed him to the capped region. And I asked again, please tell me, I know the community will be interested in exactly where you had in mind to put solar panels on that site. So hopefully he might have a little more clarity tomorrow, because I know that's something the community wants to know.
I can talk about that a little bit. I don't think there's any plan yet on where they would go because there's some work that needs to be done. The EPA is going to be doing some new testing along the banks, which was never tested before. They're going to be running trenches, 4 trenches in to see they're going to do a much more in-depth thing than was ever done before. They're going to actually, instead of doing core drilling, they're going to dig trenches to see what's coming in. They're also going to do, the EPA is interested in, they're going to do some new core drilling in the rest of the site. Because
This is the federal EPA?
Yes. They're testing for, or whoever's doing the testing, they're testing for some more different chemicals that were not tested for before to see if they're in the site. So there's going to be new testing on the actual site itself. And once we get the results back from that, then we can make a decision on any kind of development, solar, whatever's going to be happening. So everything's sort of, what we would do there is on hold until we get the testing back. Testing should happen the 3rd week of November.
That's great. I just wanted to make it clear that while the tannery site has been mentioned, this does not endanger the farmer's market site in that consideration. And I'm sure that will be discussed tomorrow evening as well.
Nina, back to
Bruce?
the number, I guess the power, the comparison between 2014 and the current numbers. Maybe you said this and I missed it, and I can look more carefully at the report, but what do they attribute that increase in such a short period? If we're targeting one number and it's going up as fast as it suggests, maybe we need a
It would be
cushion.
interesting to know. I suspect I believe that we got some new snow-making guns, which take
Snowball
a
then.
huge amount of energy. And I am curious about whether the wastewater treatment plant put in some new machinery as well during that time. I don't know. But those are the 2 places I'd look. Certainly, the snow bowl and the wastewater treatment plant are the largest consumers of energy in our town.
Well, in those cases, I would expect that if the new equipment is in place, we won't see a continuing increase at that rate.
I suspect not.
You didn't explore those
However, we
trends,
do
so
have a
this-
16, was 14, now $16 million upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, and I don't know how much energy increase is anticipated with that upgrade. That upgrade is on its way. Mark, do you have any sense of the timing on that?
No idea. Not yet. It's not a one-year process. It's multi-year, I believe, so I don't know the time.
So we're kind of going backwards. And remember that energy, the 2.05 approximately million kilowatt hours included the offset by Seabright Hydro, which has been taken offline. So actually, if you subtract Seabright Hydro from the 2014 numbers, you get 2.25 million kilowatt hours annually. So that's kind of really where we've been, that's kind of where we thought we were about. And so we're 500,000 over that at this point. And I don't know if it would help to know what contributed to that. We need to get a sense of that or not?
One question I have is, I'd like to know if we're comparing apples to oranges or if both reports we're looking at the same exact thing, because that's what we don't know.
Well, remember, I did a whole lot of work to put that spreadsheet together that tells us exactly, what all the meters are, where they are, what the numbers are, we have yearly figures. The town has that, we have that data, and it shouldn't be too difficult to
Should be
compare
pretty
that with the data from the 2014, and we could have very clear understanding of where what's happening.
I think before we got on the road of making suggestions doing this, we should actually do that research and find out exactly what the situation is. Because otherwise, we're just sort of making proposals without the background to know
Well,
exactly what we're discussing.
The town, to my knowledge, hasn't actually tracked kilowatt hours per meter. That the first I could be mistaken, but the first time that we've actually put it all on a spreadsheet is when Watershed did it for us in 2015. Is that right?
And then we did it again because we.
And then you did it again.
That's right. So it's fairly straightforward because they get all the bills from CMP, so we know exactly every meter, how much it used last year.
So the 2014 numbers, the 2018 numbers, and these 2018-19 numbers can all be compared.
They
Well,
should
let me
be
ask a
able
question.
to.
Do you know how the 2014 and the 2018 numbers compared?
That I don't know.
See, I'd like to know those figures before we start, getting into the weeds about we need to do this, do that. I'd like to get all three reports compared and look what we're seeing to see what compares. It'd be interesting to know how your report, so you did the two same exact reports from 14 to 18. So those, I'd like to see the growth there, because I don't know where he got his information, and so I don't know if we're looking at apples to oranges or oranges
Well,
to oranges.
I think they're apples to apples. In fact, he did, I was asking him, I was looking down this list, and I'm seeing things like, I'm looking at the list of account numbers, and then I look at the locations, and there, quite a few of them, the locations are designated as a street. What does that mean? What municipal use is at that street? I thought the street lights were
No, not all the streetlights. Some of the streetlights are
Were they-
metered.
were their own meter,
Some-
all in one meter.
No. So there's, for example, parking lot and Main Street, they're on because they're town-owned, they're metered, not like the CMP lights, which are leased at a,
Okay.
so,
So that's kind of, I really wondered about that because I'm seeing things like Elman School Street, High and Mountain Street, Elman Washington Street, Atlantic and Main Street, Mountain Street, Bayview Street, Union Street, Chestnut Street, Norumbega Drive, Washington Street, Main Street, and it just goes on. Not all of them are just streets, but there are quite a few, and I don't know what that means. I said in other sections of this list, you do have specific identifiers like wastewater on C Street, which is very understandable. And he said, well, I got a lot of those identifiers off of the chart that Watershed made.
Well, this may be a not acceptable thing to say. I don't understand why it's never discussed, but the Snow Bowl consumes, as I understand it, significantly more than half of the town's energy. It seems we're not for sure, but we think it's quite possible that much of this increase over the last 4 to 5 years has been because of new snowmaking equipment. We know that global warming is going to mean that if we wish to continue to operate the Snow Bowl as a town in the way in which it has been operated, we will need to continue constantly making more snow, not every year, but as a general trend line. Shouldn't we be discussing this kind of openly as to whether this is a sensible mode of operation with which to proceed with the Snow Bowl, given the likely significant increases in energy use, or whether there might be other less energy consumptive modes in which to operate the facility that would still benefit the town, that would still allow toboggan racing, that would still have, some benefits, but wouldn't use so much snowmaking? I mean, is that a taboo subject or something, or?
No,
It
a little bit.
seems to me obvious that.
It is
we
an
should
obvious
be
question.
discussing that.
It is an
I
obvious-
just bring it up.
It's a good one to bring up during this discussion
I-
of energy
I think
with the select board.
I think it would be, a way to think about this is, if we were to have 100% of our municipal electrical energy generated renewably by solar, then you could potentially you could defend, at least on some level, the continued snowmaking at the Snow Bowl. If we don't have renewable energy, municipal renewable energy, then there is no possible way that we could justify continued growth of energy use in the snowball, which is just another reason why we need to be accelerating our acquisition of renewable energy. And I hope that we, as the Energy Committee, can signal that message, continue to signal that we're looking for progress, rapid progress on identifying and entering into PPAs so that we can say, yes, we get 100% of our municipal from solar. And I know that the Select Board is certainly interested in that, so it's just a question of, I think it's important to continue to understand the need to move quickly, because every day that we don't do it, we're adding to the problem.
And one other thing that, in my discussions this morning, Audra is continuing to investigate parcels of land that we could use for that purpose, and is looking at another one. And we're also still in negotiations with the school about putting panels on the middle school. We're pushing for that as well. So it's ongoing. It hasn't stopped just because it's not getting a lot of press. We are still doing that.
Come back to the snowball for a moment. I mean, I don't know what trend information you guys used in the watershed reports, but I don't know that, I appreciate that as we get warmer and warmer, we'll probably have a shorter and shorter season, but I understand the last couple of years they have had snow there much longer than they had in prior years. So I don't know if I think it would be easy enough to collect that information at some point if we're going to be looking at.
I think Marina already has done that. We have some of that information on likely rainfall and snowfall data. That's already, Marina's done that work already, so we have that.
So we could project if we wanted to look at energy use per warming factor of some kind, right?
Yeah, we did that in Watershed's vulnerability report last year. There's also details on snow versus rainfall. It would make sense that there would be more snow around now, and then it'll drop off, but yeah, we have that information.
Great, thanks.
The other part of that is that when the snow falls, makes a huge difference to the viability and the economic viability of the snowball, and that's a huge town concern, and it is to some degree a third rail. For those of you that are subway people, because there's a limited window when people are willing to spend money to get tickets to go skiing, and it tails off. So if we get lots of snow in April, there's some of us that are diehard that'll still go out and ski, but there's lots of people that families just stop doing it. Part of that's a mind shift, but Christmas week, et cetera, deep winter is when people are doing it.
And one of the things I can tell you, the last 2 years, when we've made a profit at the snowball, the snowmaking, and every year, the snowmaking starts usually in December and ends beginning of February?
Usually, yeah,
It's-
try the extra
Maybe in
compressors that are
January.
rented, they usually go back February, they go back 2 months after we rented them. So usually we get them, they don't start rental until they turn them on, which is around 15th of December often. So that gets you to about the 15th of February.
Yeah.
And so the bulk of it happens, it's front-loaded to get base down so you can get.
And the most of the snowfall we had the two biggest snowfalls the last 2 years in the month of March.
Which is historically true.
Yeah, which kept the snowball open longer, which was great, but there's no snowmaking going on at that point. And I'm also curious to know if we know for a fact that the new snow guns are less efficient than.
I don't,
Yeah, and I hate to make suppositions
yeah,
about that
no,
stuff without knowing.
we were trying to guess.
We're trying to cover more ground than we did before.
And the most recent change that was made with snow guns is for guns that will actually, they are less efficient, but efficiency depends on when you can use them. And so a hyper-efficient gun that you can never use doesn't actually make any snow. So it's very efficient from an energy perspective, but it's very inefficient from a snow-making perspective. So we switched to guns that actually will make snow in the conditions that we have when we need to make snow, and they are somewhat less efficient than the most efficient guns, but they're the most efficient guns at making the snow when we need it, if that makes any sense. It's like you need four-wheel drive, you can't use a Prius.
Thank you, Brian. I want to mention that Brian sits on our Recreation Committee, and he is also very active at the Snow Bowl. He's a ski patrolman at the Snow Bowl, so he's very tuned in to what's going on at the Snow Bowl, and we really appreciate your input on that, Brian. And I've got more questions for you later.
One added thought to that discussion of using the snow bowl, again, getting a little bit more insight into how accurate this increase is, and if it is indeed coming from these snowmaking guns at the snow bowl would be really important information to have, not to state the obvious. If we are comparing apples to apples, and it is, the snow gun is the culprit, this whole conversation around these four potential areas for solar expansion, array expansion, to cover 30% of municipal energy use, a 500,000 to 700,000 kilowatt hour per year increase from 2014 is also about a 30% increase. So in terms of just the conversations around not just economic viability, but sustainability of the snow bowl, if this is all indeed true, expanding solar would essentially cover increased energy consumption at the snow bowl. And I feel like that we need to be able to tie that together really concretely.
I think the one thing Pete is correct about is that getting the town's energy, solar production up to 100% of the town needs is what we need to do. Because
But
that,
do you mean municipal, or do you mean townwide?
well, municipal to start, because that's what we're spending. I mean, the other thing that came up, we're in addition to looking for more land, and the new laws allow for more shared solar usage, we're not looking to just stop right at, okay, we've paid for the towns, let's keep going. We're looking for a bigger project. Also, there's discussions, Jeremy's been talking to private building owners to see if they would be willing to do solar as well. So that's going on as well. We're not, we're trying to be as wide-looking as we possibly can. And, like I said, the first thing we need to do is our first goal is to get 100% of the town's needs. And then that, takes away, then we can look at, there are other issues to look at the snow bowl, and then we can keep moving on from there. There's no reason to stop. There's enough land in Maine that we should be able to power the whole state.
One thing that comes to mind in terms of the role of the Energy Committee in that endeavor is if, the acreage or square footage that's needed to get to 30% to cover the snow bowl, and then 100% for municipal, and then beyond, if there are very clear and simple, what's the word I'm looking for, parameters, or what the town is really looking for when they go to sites potentially to acquire, or the idea of sharing, kind of donating roof space or land space, if there is kind of it would be helpful for everyone in town to know what is the ideal conditions that the town is looking for in their own survey. I feel like we could play a role in investigating if and when we get to that point.
Are you meaning to get the word out to the public to see if they have ideas? Is that what you're saying?
No, not to go that far at this point, but I think starting here, we have reviewed, well, I've only been on this committee for about half a year now, but I know this went back a long time, in reviewing which parcels of land or which sites had the best, affordability, potential, energy creation, that sort of thing. If there are general guideposts as the town starts looking outside of those sites of land, rooftop, what are the basic ideal conditions? I just feel like as a starting point, committee members
I'm not
should
clear
know.
on what the action item is on what you're
Well,
suggesting.
I think
Well,
one,
there are private landowner or private building owners that may be at some point working with the town town on.
Are you
going
saying we need
beyond-
to find more, I mean, are you,
Down the road, yeah. I mean, I think there's some very clear low-hanging fruit that everyone's been trying to accelerate progress on land that the town already owns and what's the best potential and how to move forward as urgently as possible. But clearly, there will be a need to go beyond
well, that,
already
well,
identified sites.
Jeremy and Audrey are doing that very
I think
aggressively.
one of the questions you asked is, and yeah, excuse me, I've been in this meeting room today. This is my 5th hour here today. We've had a lot of meetings. And at some point in one of the meetings, and it might have been this one, the amount of land that we need to do what we'd like to accomplish, I think, as somebody mentioned today, it was 7.8 acres. Was that in this meeting, or?
Yep.
I have no idea where it came from.
This is municipal, though? Or
That's just municipal.
I just
Doesn't
think
seem like
getting
that much.
on the same page around the acreage that's needed, the square, just, I feel like those are figures that we should all have some
Well, that's-
working understanding
Right,
of.
that's what this report is about. And it's being presented to the public by way of being presented to the select board tomorrow. So that's giving us, the whole point was to find out, what do we need? And it wasn't all that expensive. It was $2,500 for the report.
Fine, yeah. I just want to say that I think it's important for us to understand that the business model for how this, solar is going to happen in the future. And it's going to be large scale. It's going to be 7, 10, 20, 30 acre plots. And there's going to be business entities, just like they were discussing public-private partnerships like at the high school, where a business is going to say, I'm going to provide the land, I'm going to put in the stuff, and you're going to, instead of buying it from CMP, you're going to buy it from me. And that there could be, how that deal is structured going down the pike, whether you assume after you buy it back with a bonding after 7 years like we're doing with Sagamore. So I think it's important for us to, there's no need for the town to get into the nitty gritty. What the town needs to do is say, we need 2 megawatts of solar power. Who's got it? And what's your price? And let's get going.
It's creating a market for, we have to create market demand for what we need, and that we've been unfettered by the legislation, 1711, that now allows, that to happen more easily. So I think your point is a great one, Anna, which is minimum just for the current municipal load is 8 acres. It's rounded off. Let's not go down, let's just go there. So we need 8 acres, and there are other criteria. The reality is, as Pete says, I believe, that, even if Wayfair, or whatever they call it now, Lyman Morse wanted to put solar on all their stuff, the reality is it's not going to make sense for them. It's too small, it's too hard. We need big, wide, open spaces. Unfortunately, BD, it means places where we could be growing trees, that we will not be growing trees. But, I think the carbon return is better on a solar panel than a tree. And there's lots of places that aren't suitable for solar that are suitable for trees. So we can do both. So I think it's incumbent upon us to say, this is what we need there. It would be nice to know, to your point, I think, is what would we need for the whole town? Well, you'd probably need all the acreage in town. The reality is we've got to decrease that demand.
8 acres is not a lot of land, really.
No, but that's only municipal demand. If we added up the
Yes.
aggregate of
Oh, all
all the
right. Okay.
residential, commercial, and other demand in the bounds of our township, it might be 25 times that.
Given that we are the Energy and Sustainability Committee, another elephant in the room that we're not addressing with this discussion is all those panels need to be disposed of at the end of their useful life in approximately 40 years.
We could,
And recycling of solar panels has not been resolved, and Europe is struggling with that issue. of what do we do with these things now? So that's another conundrum that it would be nice if we didn't ignore.
Well,
if we-
there's basically, at this stage, there are very few solar panels ready and won't be for a decade or two. There are reprocessing methodologies being looked into and considered. The Europeans don't, at this stage, have an actual reprocessing of it because they don't have 30-year-old solar panels in any large volume. It's something that ought to be worked on. I do not believe myself personally, and I'd be willing to gather information if you want about it. I thought I actually did once, but maybe it was for another purpose. About why, while we should keep it in mind, while we should maybe even start writing kind of stipulations about the notion that it should eventually be done, I do not believe that at this time it would be correct to try to slow down solar in any way,
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
have not reached a resolution
Right.
on how that
it's
will
true.
be done 20 to 25 years hence.
Mm-hmm.
That would, I would see that as a big mistake, the world would burn up. It's clearly the best mode of
So it's,
generating. What I would say, and this is also relevant to the snowball, it's fine to say that we should offset 100%, and I would certainly agree with that. But at least as the Energy Committee, I would say we should also point out and try to, get people to consider it. I'm not saying I have a hard position, even personally, much less that the committee does, but that we should urge people to think it's not only what kind of energy, but how much energy. Just to say, conservation of energy and efficiency of energy consumption is also hugely important. And we should be making that point when consideration is given to how the town consumes more than half of
Well,
that it consumes as a town.
we've got a lot to cover today, and
I'll let it go,
We have 25 minutes left.
so thank you, Sarah. I looked up your 2018 watershed listing of kilowatt hours, annual kilowatt hours consumption for municipal, and the total that they came up with for 2018 was 1.915 million kilowatt hours.
Wait, is that the spreadsheet from CMP?
That's the one that you sent me.
Yeah, that's the one that I did. And yeah, those are CMP numbers.
So it is a bit confusing, given that
That's
it was
why.
2.07, then it went up, and now it's gone down, and then now it's up again, so it may not be apples to apples, and I don't know who's going to be responsible for rectifying all those numbers, but that's something that you can bring up at the select board meeting,
Bring that up
and
tomorrow. But
that they would need to find a staff member or somebody to look at both watershed reports.
Well, I think there's a much easier way to do that, and that's just we know exactly what we paid in 2018 to CMP, and we know exactly what we paid to CMP in 2014, and we know what the rates are. We know how many, we know the rates for each of the meters, so it should be fairly straightforward, just like we got that spreadsheet from, we should be able to do that.
Let's move on.
Thank you. I really would like to move on, if you don't mind. So there, just a couple of quick questions, Mark.
The Superfund site, I think I heard erroneous information about,
Okay.
and school land, we're negotiating, I think the school land, there's a complicated negotiation going on at the school, and so it's in the process, I don't know where we are. But right now, it's more concentrating on, I think they found that the land wasn't totally useful. I don't know what their deal is there, but right now, we're trying to get panels on the school itself.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. Sarah sent around a couple of reports about the federal efforts to extend the solar tax credits of 30% for another 10 years. and a couple of representatives are, depending on which group they talk to, are trying to express some hope that this might be, that credit might be extended for 10 years, but it would have to pass the Senate, so I wouldn't hold my breath on that. Right.
That's a fair statement. I mean, I think I wouldn't rule it out, but I will try to follow it and let people know.
Oh, I
And,
appreciate
we
that.
don't need
That'd be
to-
great, yeah.
We don't need to discuss it at this
So
point.
on to the next thing. Pearl, shortly after our last meeting, there was a student climate gathering outside the high school on the playing field. And we also asked you about social media efforts for the Energy Committee. Is there anything you can share with us?
Yes, so the strike was very successful. There were plenty of students there, and as I'm sure you all saw, it was a huge international event, which was great. And moving forward, I have been striking every Friday, or have been trying to, and I'm trying to gather more students to do that. But it would be great if, going into the winter or by the end of the year, that could be a town-recognized thing that happens every week. Another thing is that at that strike, on the 20th, I wrote a petition from the teenagers of Camden to be handed in to the town select board that included the information about Sagamore that you sent me. And
That was what? What was the petition requesting?
the petition was requesting that the select board move forward with expanding the solar array on Sagamore. So I can send a copy of that to you if you want it. And so it got signed, and I hope that it was sent in to the select board, but I'm not
I
sure.
have not seen it.
Okay, I'll check. I wasn't there that day, so I did not have control over that, but I will check with the other members of my group to see if that happened. In terms of social media, did we ever check with the select board about whether that was okay or not?
I discussed it. There's discussion. We have no problem with a social media campaign, but the majority of the board feels that it needs to be, what we're doing needs to be cleared with the board first, so that we're not, because it's not just this committee, it's every committee. And
It being, it is every committee, was
in terms of everybody wanting, we need to put this out there, we need to put that out there. The same reason that we asked for work plans, so that we don't have all sorts of people going at different odds. So we would like to be able to okay what goes out there, so that, we sort of know what's going on, so it doesn't become an independent voice, because this is not an independent committee. So, because it was my idea to put I think social media should be out there, and I think it's a great way to reach people. But we just need to be in concert, so we're all thinking together about where we're going.
So you're saying that if you'd like to have a Facebook page for the Energy Committee, first we would want the select board to okay that, and then anything that to be posted there needs to be okayed at the next select board meeting. Is that correct?
Somehow, that was sort of the consensus from some of the other people. That's what I want to see. We never came to an exact, because I brought it up, we never came to an exact definition of exactly what we want. But most people felt that they didn't want independent, all the committees doing independent
Yeah.
stuff, because it gets out of control.
Well, do you think that the select board could come up with a general instructions about how to go about it, so that we have clarity on how we could
That
move
would be a
forward?
great idea. I think maybe, Pearl, maybe at some point you should come to a meeting and talk about it, and talk about what you can do, what you'd like to do, and the advantages of it. And, so we're not just talking among ourselves, because I brought it up at a point where I sort of felt, in some respects, I was sort of fighting uphill.
It seems to me like, for example, if you said, did you know that the Sagamore Farm array covers X? Or
Right.
did you know that the snowmaking at the Snow Bowl takes up X percentage of the towns? I mean, I don't think any of this is going to be controversial because it's just all true. I'm just saying.
I'm just the messenger today.
Yeah.
You can,
I would suggest that what we need to get is we need to get the select board or Audra both to authorize that we can create the Facebook page, or we just create one and say, is this okay? And then administrative approval, so that when you go to post something, if it's going to be posted officially, someone has administrative approval, and they just look at it and say, that's good, click. And the question is, who is that individual going to be? That's the only questions that we need to have answered.
I think that clarification would help. I think it's rather awkward to ask the select board to do that, given they meet
They
twice a
yeah,
month.
It should
the
be the
question is,
board. It
who would they designate,
It
I
would
think?
probably, I'm sure it would be the town manager.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can we set up a Facebook page? The select board could okay the setup of the Facebook page, and then perhaps everything that we add to it would go to the town manager first, and then it could be added to the Facebook page. Can you find out whether we could do that?
Again, I can, but I think it would be much better if Pearl came to the meeting or came to the meeting and
Go
made a
together,
presentation
or-
and said, this is what we'd like to do, what's the process? Because otherwise became a circular conversation and it didn't accomplish much.
I just think that, I hear you, but I think that in terms of projects that need to get some momentum, that if we're talking about a highly restricted social media page, that should not even be on the list of things that we're doing. I mean, I'm really like,
I can understand that.
yeah, I mean, I think that all of the stuff that we're working on is really great, and it's great to be doing it all together, but this is going really, really slow. So I think that momentum needs to be placed elsewhere if it's really going to take that much effort just to get a Facebook page up. So,
Yeah, I think that that's well spoken, and, we're already asking the town employees to do an awful lot, and they're overwhelmed, and, just if we think about going back the street, they're thinking about streetlights, they're thinking about solar, there's a lot on the plate, and I think in general, I think it would be, I would suggest that these committees could be a little bit more be employed a little bit more usefully to take some of the work off of and that's the part that, the idea of having to have oversight on this and that. And the other thing, I understand the need or the desire to have some control and messaging, but by the same token, I also wonder if we're not holding the cards pretty close in the detriment of getting stuff done.
I guess, like I said, in this specific instance, I am the messenger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Perhaps when the much dreamed for new website comes in, we can submit things to see whether that could be posted on the website to get, here's some information from the Energy Committee. And sort of like a
Timing
new,
on that, the new website, do you know?
They're continuing to work on it. It came up in the last conversation, and I didn't hear any timeline of, it was just, it's in process is basically what I got out of the discussion.
all right, thank you for that update, Pearl, and your feedback on that. I'd like to, I had a chat with Bob Falciani, and he wants us to know that, well, I want the first item on this bullet list is one that I put in there. There is strong advocacy for energy initiatives on the select board. And we can feel happy and confident about that. And basically, well, I'll get on to the number 3 on that. I wanted to proceed. There is a request for proposal, an RFP presently out to bid for evaluating the HVAC system of the public safety building. So we're looking at energy savings, hopefully, by just evaluating that system and how can it be improved and so on. There is an RFP that will be issued in 1 to 2 weeks for conducting an energy audit of the town hall. This was done a number of years ago, and we'd really like to get this building, this Opera House, sorted out energy-wise. So that will be issued in 1 to 2 weeks. So that's good news. Our town planner continues to work on a resident energy assistance program, which could be sorted out by the end of the year. This is where we're looking at how the town can help citizens to do work on their own private properties, and how can the town assist, and who would they assist, and how would they assist, and so on, whether it's financially or other ways. So that is an ongoing thing. The Select Board has scheduled a workshop at the request of the
Ragged Mountain Foundation.
Rag Mountain Foundation to discuss the new Snowball Lodge that the Rag Mountain Foundation still would like to build, and that has been designed by an architectural firm. That workshop is scheduled for October 29th at 11 in the morning in this room, and it's with Caroline Morong and Bob Gordon on that foundation. And
For October 29th, I'm sorry.
October 29th at 11 a.m. And they will be going over the history of the lodge discussions, and they will be asking the town to raise $1 million to help fund a new Snowball Lodge. So I know we have discussed that. We have opinions about that. I would rather not get into that discussion tonight.
We could just go. Can we go? Is
Think-
this open?
Absolutely.
Can we provide feedback?
That I'm not sure. I don't remember what the rules are, but you can certainly come and listen, and I don't remember the
I
rules.
thought the Energy Committee would be very interested in knowing that that discussion will be taking place, and because we do have some pretty strong feelings about that. And I think it's best not to get into that discussion right now. And the third item in that discussion with the Chair of the Select Board, Bob Hosciani, is that the Select Board would like us to help them in a number of ways. One is that he would like to have a summary of the studies about wind energy potential that have been done, that was done by the previous Energy Committee. They'd like to have a copy of that. They'd like to sort of have a compendium of what else has been done that has dropped off the end of the table in the past, perhaps, that could be followed up on. They'd like to know what else we're seeing that we'd like the Select Board to address. Bottom line is, the Select Board is interested in helping, in trying to help. They're obviously interested because of these other projects that are underway at the present time, and they'd like us to, provide, hey, please look, have you looked at this, have you looked at that, what about this? So Beatty's suggestion this evening is another thing that can be suggested to the Select Board regarding tree cover and so on. So I don't know how we can proceed with that. Maybe you could think about it and send some emails around, and we can create a compendium that we might be able to present at some time. But I would like.
I mean, of other energy initiatives that we
Yes.
think should.
Yes, so
Okay.
we've all got ideas.
Yes.
And I think it would be good for us to start creating a summary of those ideas so that we can get something to them. So that's that meeting, and I would like to be able to hear from Rosanna Patane from York, Maine, about what's going on in York, and hopefully we have some time to hear from her. And
Okay, thank you so much. This is so interesting. My mind is going back and forth between York and Camden here. We're also having our streetlights done with Real Term. And the reason that we chose Real Term was that they're a turnkey vendor. So the Energy Committee actually will be supervising the process, but we're supporting the DPW director in doing that. So we're working together with him on that. We have just started. It took the Energy Committee 5 years to persuade the Select Board to say yes. They actually said yes twice, once in 2017, and somehow the contract never got signed, and so they said yes again in 2019, and this time the contract did get signed. So
oh, congratulations, wow.
thank you. The Energy Committee in York works for the Select Board. Our job is to recommend policy where energy is concerned. And we've also handled a lot of projects. Really, the stuff that's gotten done in the town of York, the Energy Committee has done. And it's been a lot. We wrote an energy chapter to the comprehensive plan. I think we might be one of the few towns in Maine to have done that. So it's in our comprehensive plan that we're obligated to do this work. We got the LED streetlights approved. We did a big weatherization program that was a partnership with Habitat and the York Community Services Group, which is a private, not-for-profit family services organization that the town subcontracts to. So all of the family assistance programs are handled by YCSA. They were a partner, and we got $7,000 from the Rotary organization, and Efficiency Maine matched that, and that turned into $21,000. And we established a kind of a model program. Actually, Efficiency Maine gave us the award that year for an innovative program. We worked with professional home auditors, which was a little different than the way the VISTA program works and some other programs which are really just walkthroughs by volunteers, not professional audits. So we kind of upped the game a little bit there. But the big deal was a year or so ago, we hired a VISTA volunteer, Lucy Brennan. Some of you may know her. She is now the #2 person in the South Portland Sustainability Office, and just a fabulous human being. She took a year and did a bottoms-up emissions inventory for the entire community, not just the municipal energy use, but everything by everybody in the entire town. And we made a series of presentations to the Select Board of the results of her work. And at the end of her year, I made several major recommendations to the board, and they accepted all of them because they were just so impressed with. There's nothing like showing people the facts.
Could we get a copy of what those recommendations were and what you asked?
The recommendations are very simple. Join the Global Covenant of Mayors, set a challenging target. We recommended 50% cut in emissions community-wide by 2030 and 100% cut by 2050, and fund $150,000 in a climate action planning process to get us there. And the town manager added, and hire a sustainability manager.
What's the population of York?
15,000.
Okay.
So the board chewed on the second and third recommendations for a while, but they did finally say, we support the targets, which are good targets, I think.
30% by,
50% by 2030, and to zero emissions as a community by 2050.
That's the same, Those are the same goals as on the covenant itself that we have signed on to. Yeah.
Community-wide, it's not just.
Community-wide, this means my house, my car, my neighbor's house, my neighbor's car, everybody. So that's why I said, okay, it's going to, we need a planning process, and it's going to have to be a planning process unlike any other planning process we've ever used. This has to involve the entire community in the planning process itself.
So the town manager has committed to hiring someone?
The town manager has requested that of the select board, and they said that they would support it.
And what would be the role, what would be the job title?
Sustainability planner, I think, is the job title that the town manager decided on. And it'll be in our May budget package. So the 150 for the planning process and the sustainability manager position will need a town vote. And I have a lot of confidence. The citizens of York have been very supportive. I think that both of those will pass hugely. The energy chapter got an 85% voter approval when we put it on the ballot. So the planning process is intended to involve people not just in creating the plans, but then in carrying them out. I talked to Cincinnati, who did a similar process, and I'm going to steal their idea. They ended up with 80, they call them neighborhood captains, I'm going to call them neighborhood representatives or something, who stand up in the planning process and say, okay, I'm making a commitment to sign up 10 of my neighbors for a bulk purchase weatherization program. Or, all right, I'm making a commitment to gather 15 people together for a solar array that we share. Or whatever those strategies are that come out of the planning process. The point of it is that we have citizens in the community, business people, heads of organizations, ordinary citizens, saying, we're going to make it happen, because that's what it's going to take. Then I just got invited to join the Governor's Climate Council Buildings and Housing Work Group. So I'm going to the very first meeting next week, and I'm excited about that because that's a chance to do more work, not just in New York, but across the state. And housing is a kind of a special interest of mine. Another thing I'm working on at the moment, the reason I'm here actually for 2 months, is to organize a co-housing community, hopefully in Camden, that will be a co-housing community with a significant component of affordable houses, perhaps a third to a half, and by affordable I mean capped at a price that's affordable at 80% of the area median income, so it's going to be around $150,000 in that neighborhood. And also, all of the homes will be net zero energy. So it's the first, it will be the first co-housing community in New England, aside from one in Connecticut that is just building homes now, that will combine those three goals. So if I can interest people here in joining the three of us that are in this startup group to join the core group and help us keep the process moving. It's a lot of work to make it happen, but I think it's an opportunity for the state and Camden to create a model of how you make an intentional neighborhood that's not just a great place to live, but that also can serve other social goals like affordability and net zero energy. So that's me in a nutshell.
Can I ask another question? What have you learned from the other towns, the other committees you've been meeting? You were in Rockland and
Yep.
somewhere else?
Yep. What I learned is that we're all, so far, the towns that I've been talking with are doing more or less the same thing. We're focusing on projects, and that's what the Energy Committee in York has done for the last half dozen years that I've been involved, is focusing on projects like getting solar arrays done. Oh, I forgot to mention, we have two landfills in York, one that's a capped landfill and an older one that's just a dump. Together, they add up to about 6 megawatts of potential solar. And we're talking with solar providers right now about developing all of it. And that will provide 100% of our municipal load with about 1.5 megawatts left over. And the idea for that 1.5 megawatts is to make it available to the community. So it'll be a solar farm for use by residents. And it will have a set-aside of 20% of that capacity for low-income families who will simply get their power free.
That's great.
And so we've been focusing on projects, and now there's a crucial pivot, I think, that's happening in the community. First of all, the Select Board has gotten religion, which is kind of wonderful, because it's been a real struggle for the last half dozen years. And the town manager sees a way to make things happen. One of the things that is coming up in our near future is a new town hall, and he's made a commitment to make that a net zero building. He's asking for his direct reports to submit capital budgets that identify opportunities to convert their fleets to electric, to raise the energy efficiency of the buildings that they occupy, and to look for any other opportunities that might help get us to 100% to zero emissions for the municipal use, not just electricity, but all of the power needs of the municipality, including vehicles, which is a big one. I think he's said 50% and 100% same dates as the community is what the commitment is that he's making.
Sorry, another question. Has your police department experimented with any hybrid vehicles?
Yes, reluctantly. Yes, but they also now have a mandate by the town manager and by the select board, so they're looking at the vehicles.
'Cause we got our first one that's being tested right now, so,
You bought one?
by the chief, yeah, for the
Okay.
chief's car.
What did you buy?
It's a sedan, a larger sedan. I don't remember what, I think Ford's the only one making them right now, so I think it's Ford. And we bought it as the chief's car because his was the next car to be replaced. And so he could test it because he's the one, one to be reluctant. But from what I understand, he's happy with it so far. I haven't talked to him personally
Okay.
about it, but
Great.
we've been working on that.
Yeah, that's one of the capital requests that the town manager has made of his direct reports, the police chief. So the idea now is to manage this pivot so that the Energy Steering Committee is not the entity making the changes, but the changes are incorporated in our daily decision-making, certainly at the municipal level, but more and more, we need to be doing education and getting resources to residents and businesses in town, so it becomes part of their day-to-day decision-making as well. That's the transition that we're trying to manage through the planning process next spring. So thank you.
Wow. Fantastic. That's, I think the key is to hire someone, a paid position.
Yeah.
To manage that, because it is a daunting task
That's a key.
to have any city do.
But I will make a commercial for the Vista program, too. I think there is a powerful resource in Vista AmeriCorps of young people, many of whom are coming out of colleges right now with energy policy degrees. There's a huge workforce opportunity for the state there, and for municipalities, these are young, energetic people who can really increase the capacity of the municipality to address the energy transition.
These would be more affordable, right?
$6,500 for a year is what the town pays. The volunteers themselves make a little over $1,000 a month, so they're poor. And what we did was find a $200 a month rental because somebody volunteered their place for our Vista volunteer. Otherwise, she couldn't have afforded to live in York. I'm sure the same is here in Camden. Affordable housing is scarce. And they spend a year, and the one requirement is that they have to have a focus on low-income residents. So the way we did that was in Lucy's emissions inventory that she did, we planned a survey and a series of focus groups with families who use the local pantry and family services organization. And we incorporated what they told us in her research that showed what the energy challenges were for low-income families, how much energy costs them as compared to the general population, and what kinds of programs and strategies could address those needs. So as long as you have a way to incorporate equity and making sure you look at the low-income community in the work that your Vista person does, then you can qualify for applying for one.
And this is the federal program, right?
Yeah. Vista
East
AmeriCorps.
In the United States, basically.
Yeah. Right.
Explain what you mean by incorporate equity.
As long as what you do in terms of your strategies or programs and the work that the Vista person is doing for you includes the needs of the low-income community. That's what I mean by equity.
Equity, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Equalness,
needs
Yeah.
of the,
Fairness, you know.
fairness, yeah.
I mean, I'm used to equity being what, a house? or
Home
something.
ownership, yeah, no, it's not that.
How are you set up in communicating with your community as a committee? And we're back to the Facebook page versus the select board establishing some.
We don't have a
banners.
Facebook page. That was striking some familiar notes.
15,000 is larger than Camden.
Yeah, we have one static page on the town's website, and the town is very, very careful because of federal laws that anything that goes on any of those websites is not anything that an investor could construe one way or another. So we can't talk about projections and financial possibilities and that sort of thing. So we were audited, I think, a few years ago, and there was a finding, so now everybody's locked down. We have a great local newspaper, the York Weekly, and we have stories in the York Weekly almost weekly on what the Energy Committee is
Do
doing.
you have one member of the committee who takes on that responsibility?
No, we have a fabulous reporter who just covers us. Not on the committee, I mean,
So how-
on the York Weekly.
That might be,
How do they get that information?
They come to meetings. We're in front of the select board a lot. We're making recommendations, we're explaining things to them. We are doing the work. The one difference that I see between us and you is it sounds like you're getting direction from the select board. We've been giving the select board direction. It's been the other way around. The initiative has come from the Energy Committee consistently. And as I mentioned, it's been a real slug up a hill for many years and it's only recently that there's a new day on the board.
That's pretty similar to our.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I would say the solar thing came from this committee, real-term lights came from this committee.
Okay.
So it has been started here and gone to the select board.
Okay,
which
so
has
that
been
is
really good.
similar.
And the one other thing I'll add to what Anita was saying is the select board from when I joined 4 or 5 years ago compared to now has gone 180 degrees in terms of being responsive to energy demands and making it a priority, which is great.
So that's very similar too then, yeah. That's great, good news. Yeah, I think communicating with people in the community is a real dilemma. So I will say, we have another organization in town called Ready for 100. This is a statewide initiative. It's part of the Sierra Club. This is private citizens. It has nothing to do with the Energy Committee. It's not a committee for the board or anything like that. This is just a citizens initiative. But the partnership that we've had with them has been really wonderful because they can do advocacy. They can get people out to a meeting wearing T-shirts, and we can't. They can do a lot of informing the public. They have a weekly column in the York Weekly talking about an energy topic of one sort or another every single week. So they have helped enormously get the word out. And on a couple of select board meetings when we were making recommendations that we really needed the town to support, they packed the place. They were standing room only, and literally the select board looked out on a sea of T-shirts. So it was
That's great.
very helpful.
So Rosanna, can you make it crystal clear whether you are requesting some action on the part of Camden? You mentioned joining you in an effort, the co-housing effort or something. So, I mean, when you walk out of this room, I want to be sure that if you had a message to get to us, that it's gotten to us clearly.
Well, two messages. One, in my capacity on the Energy Committee, I've been saying for a long time that the Maine Municipal Association or somebody should convene towns in conferences where we can exchange information like this and learn from each other. I think there's a great need for that, and nobody is doing it. And when I talked to the Maine Municipal Association about it, they said, well, towns tell us what they want, and they haven't told us they wanted that yet. So one thing would be, I would love it if you wanted to think about how we can encourage somebody, maybe the Maine Municipal Association or somebody else, to have a regular forum for towns to talk to each other about this work. There's a lot we can help each other with. That's my official request. My personal request is if you or anybody you know is interested in the co-housing model I mentioned, please get in touch with me. I'm here until the end of November, staying in Tenants Harbor. My cell phone is 207-351-5042.
351? 351-5042?
Right. Please email me or text me or call me. I'd love to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wondered if you have approached Hannah Pingree and the new statewide
Climate Council.
climate council.
Well, that's the one that I mentioned that I was invited to participate
So
in.
wouldn't you want the climate council to convene that group that you're talking about, rather than necessarily?
The Climate Council is a temporary organization. They're not going to be, they're not an institution. So they've got a charter that I think ends at the end of 2020, if I'm not mistaken, when they present their recommendations to the state. So the working groups, of which I'm going to join one, will be developing the strategies and the recommendations, the Climate Council will work with them and then present them to the state.
At the same time, you can be making those same recommendations that you.
Yes.
That you're making to the
Maine Municipal
Maine
Association.
Municipal
Yeah.
Association, and see if they can direct it from the state direction.
Well, the
Get-
MMA, the idea that I had in mind for the MMA is that they're a resource for municipalities, and they're a permanent institution. So I would just like them or somebody like them to provide a venue and a mechanism for towns to work together on the energy work.
One question, who's your town manager?
Steve Burns?
Steve Burns?
Yeah.
Mark, do you think it would be helpful if we could get from them how they're working with the low-income groups?
I was
And
gonna
get
ask- I
that
asked him-
information
I was
to
gonna ask Audra if
Jeremy?
she knows Steve Burns. I was going to ask Audra to see if she knows, maybe.
So,
reach out.
since Jeremy's trying to work on a program, sounds like it would be
Yeah,
very
well,
helpful to
I
know
made
what
notes,
you're.
yeah, I'll bring up the Vista thing. Well,
Well, thank you so much.
Mark, you asked for a copy of the, specifically what?
Oh, gosh, that was 20
It was
minutes
the
ago.
recommendations, the 5 recommendations.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Do you want me to send you the
Sure.
final presentation that we made to the
Yeah.
select
I'll
board?
give you a card.
Okay, great.
Okay, well,
Thanks
thank
so much,
you.
everyone.
Thank you so much for making the effort to come and hang out with us
My
and
pleasure.
give us your input and, yeah, well, it's fun to inspire each other, and I hope we can move forward with some ideas from York.
Some smart people in this state working on this. It's so hopeful.
Do the best we can, right?
Well done.
We ready to adjourn?
Just going to go turn it off if you are.
Yeah, I think we can adjourn it. And anybody want to make a motion? All in favor? All right, off we go. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. It is, it's an exciting moment, I think.